Safety first. Well, fix this old seatbelt here. All right. We are live. Wait for some people to start coming in, as this is a what's up, DB? Shout out to Pops again for the Fire Invicta Panther Watch. What's up, James? Popping bullets, yes sir. Car blog. It's time, my guys, what's happening? You know, I usually like to do this when I'm going to pick up the kitties. So, anyway, hope y'all doing well today. I am doing well myself. Just taking it a day at a time, slowly getting back to where I can start pushing more content like I used to. But for the here and now, we're just gonna do the car chats, man. Hopefully y'all are doing well. I see a few regulars in here. Shout out to y'all. James E, I saw. C, what's up? Popping Bullets, what's up? DB, what up? JP, the moderator, what's up? Man. So look, I ain't gonna waste no time, man. We're gonna get right to it. So the last time I came on and talked to you guys, actually real quick, hit a 1 in the chat if you guys can hear me okay. I just want to make sure I'm being heard okay. All right, incoming Corbett for a couple of reps. Okay, cool. Y'all can hear me. What I think it sounds like what you asking me is, am I going to come in for a couple of reps with Corbett? No, not at all. You know, I'll be honest with y'all, man. Once upon a time, I actually thought about literally going to like training camp or OTAs or whatever like that one time and like actually trying out for the Panthers. Like, you know, but I probably would have got whooped by whoever was out there. So, nah, man, not for me. Not for me at all. But anyway, the last time I talked to you guys, man, we talked about Jim Harbaugh as the potential option for the Carolina Panthers' next coach. And seemingly, now I don't know whether or not I really truly believe this, but I guess in a situation like this, like I thought it was a smokescreen in the beginning. Like I thought, like, man, there ain't no way like a coach with Harbaugh's cachet, he picks up the phone and calls us. You know, maybe it was a money play. Maybe he looked at the big contract we gave Matt Rule and thought, man, you know, as was it P.T. Barnum said, there's a sucker born every day. You know, so maybe he was thinking that David Tepper would do the same thing twice. And to be honest, I was in favor of it. Like, cause Harbaugh's different, man. Like he's just a different breed. This ain't, you know, Matt Rule was a builder, but like Harbaugh has done some impressive things even at the NFL level. So, you know, what's up, Seeker? But so I kind of figured like, man, it would, you know, he'd be somebody cool to, you know, to really bring in and, you know, see what he could turn around, you know, with this Panthers team. And you got to give credit to Steve Wilks for even getting, you know, this Panthers team legitimate, you know, to talk about in that way. So, but, you know, after hearing the reports and I don't know that there's been like, maybe I'm wrong and y'all can help me out in the chat, but like I haven't seen any like concrete reports that suggest that, you know, this whole thing with Harbaugh is like completely out. I did see a couple of tweets, but I didn't see any like written reports or anything like that. So, you know, who knows? But anyway, regardless, man, I tell you, you know, the way that I see this personally, like I was looking at a couple, because I see the names out there. I see, you know, Steve Wilks, obviously, Harbaugh's name, Mike Kafka, Shane Steichen, Jim Caldwell, who's already been interviewed. And then, oddly enough, so I got to tell a quick story. Y'all know how I like to do a little dialogue sometimes before I get started. So the year was 1999, and a gentleman was standing in a room with myself and my mother. And y'all know I like to talk. as you can see, right? Yes, Pop, all offensive coaches. As y'all can see, I like to talk. So this gentleman is in the classroom with me and my mom, and he says, "Hey, man, John would be great, and he would excel at a lot of things." Because I was struggling in school at the time. And he was like, "John would be great at a lot of things. But man, he just talked too much. Like, if we can get him to be quiet and focus on his work, man, he probably did some really great things in school," which I went on to do, to get better. But the point is that it needed to be said to my mom to get me, reared in a better direction. And I know y'all probably wondering, like, where the heck are you going with this? Well, that principal's name was Don Johnson, whose son just interviewed with the Carolina Panthers, Ben Johnson. So yes, I went to school with Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Lions, which I gotta be honest with you, there's a partiality I have. Like, I hadn't mentioned his name. I mentioned his name some last year, but I didn't really say it much, around this time. Because to tell you the truth, I'm actually a little scared for Ben to get this job because, man, I just, in order to be, in my opinion, to have like legitimacy as a podcaster, you gotta be objective. And to be honest, as y'all could, if any of y'all that have been following me for a while, y'all know that there was one player like that if he struggled, I still wouldn't be objective towards, even if he was struggling, because I like the dude. And that was Troy Pride Jr. because he lived like right around the corner from me. And I live in South Carolina now. And so it was really hard for me to like have any kind of objectivity with Troy Pride because I'm just like, I know his parents, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it's like, it's hard to do that. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, yeah, man, I'm born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina. Proud of AC Reynolds High School. Man, we had to, I was telling my okay, can y'all hear me now? What about now? Type a 1 if you can hear me. So I had a phone call coming in. My apologies. Let me know if y'all can hear me in the chat. Okay, perfect. Okay, no, what I was saying, I don't know if what the last thing you guys heard me say was, but what I was saying is that, when I was talking about going to Reynolds High School, Ben Johnson, I'm from Asheville, North Carolina originally, so I went to high school with Ben Johnson, and his dad was my principal. He's a super cool guy. But what I was talking about was how from like 2000 to like the alumni, I know I have a couple of friends on this channel. Actually, let me backtrack a little bit. I'm happy for Ben. I'm like ecstatic, for the fact that Ben is probably going to be a coach. Don't know if it's going to be here, but it's going to be somewhere he's going to be a coach. But the thing is like with here, I know that when you run a podcast, like when you have a podcast, like you have to have like objectivity. Like you have to be able to, talk about, sometimes criticize and, say some things that you might not want to say. And like the one thing that scares me about Ben becoming the coach is like, man, it's gonna be hard for me to be critical of somebody that, I share, that kind of, closeness with or whatever, as far as like us going to the same, high school, or whatever like that. And it was kind of like that, like the partiality that I showed for Troy Pride Jr. Like I live in South Carolina now, but like Troy Pride literally lives like right around the corner from us. Like I know his parents, you know what I'm saying? And so it's like really hard for me to like really go in on him if he was like, really messing up or whatever like that. Like I just didn't want to, do that. And so that does make it kind of difficult, but I'm gonna still be me. I'm still gonna, have to say what I gotta say or whatever like that. But definitely shout out to Ben Johnson. But what I really wanted to talk about was like, okay, with all these different options at coaching, I think there's a couple of different variables where we can be successful as a team, regardless to which one of these guys we choose. Because the one thing I will say that I'm glad about is that there's a lot of opportunity for us to grow with any one of these guys. Now, I noticed, as Poppin' Bullet said in the chat, all these guys are offensive guys, right? Except for Wilks, being the defensive guy. And I was listening to 99 The Fan, and they were talking about how we really need to, like Wilks, what he's going to have to sell himself on is like, yo, what's your plan going to be for the offense? Right? Sorry, I don't know if y'all can hear me again. My sound man went out there for just a second, but I'm back. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat, but I'm going to keep going. What we need is a plan for the offense. Wilks has to be able to sell like a guaranteed plan for the offense, which I think he can. And the thing is this, is like, you've got a couple of different ways that you could go. Now, the first thing that I guarantee you, the first question that comes up when they're sitting in those meetings, whether it was, Ben, Mike, Shane, Steve Wilks, whoever, when they're sitting in that meeting, what are you going to do about quarterback? What's your plan at quarterback? Because we have been going through quarterback after quarterback after quarterback, and we got to have a dedicated plan. Now, I think there's a couple of different ways you can go. I've seen quite a few people saying that if the Bears decide, if Ryan Poles decides to draft Bryce Young, CJ, Will, whoever at the top of the draft, that, we should trade for Justin Fields. I would not. I know I'm going to be probably in the minority with that, and I'm okay with whatever kind of smoke comes, as a result of that. But like, I think the one thing we got to think of is this. I heard this said today, so I don't want to steal. I'm going to steal this, but I don't want to, act like I came up with it. But this was perfect. Oftentimes, let's see, I'm trying to say this right. Oftentimes, if like a movie, like say you were going to watch a movie, right? And they condense, like, I remember when I saw, let's see, I can't think of the last movie I went to see. Okay, Wakanda Forever. That's the last movie that right? Different people have, differing opinions on Black Panther Wakanda Forever. But I remember mentioning to my wife when we went and saw this movie, I said, I feel like after seeing the movie, they gave the majority of the movie away in the trailer, right? And I was like, man, it's crazy because this movie was good, no doubt, but the majority of the movie itself was given away in the trailer. You got to see Shuri in the Black Panther suit. We all knew it was going to be Shuri. You know what I'm saying? You got to see a lot of Namor or whatever. Like there wasn't much story left over. Now, could you say in part that this is because of the amount of YouTubers and people like that give away the storyline like ahead of time? Sure, you can say that. But in my opinion, I think the trailer itself gave away more of the movie than anything else, right? That's what you get, and that's what happens. And while we get so enamored, like on Twitter, there's an absolute groundswell of people like, yo, get Justin Fields, get Justin Fields. And I'm like, man, like when you look at the body of work, we looking at like highlights. We're not looking at the whole movie. Like, I like Justin Fields, and I think that he can develop. And yes, he doesn't have a lot around him, so we can definitely give some credence to that. But like, as we know, man, the game is won from the pocket. I don't know why we keep making this mistake over and over and over again. The game of football is won from the pocket, right? I know sometimes, if we look back at like Cam Newton, some people complain like, man, they didn't put no weapons around him or whatever like that. Well, a lot of that was because Cam, intermediate throw, he struggled. So you can't put a lot of smaller guys in that would run, more hitch concepts and things like that. You needed taller guys. They went out and got Funches. He had Olsen. They got Kelvin Benjamin. They went out and grabbed like, catch radiuses of an aircraft carrier because Cam Deep, and this is the weirdest thing ever, man. Like it's hard to quantify this. How are you more accurate throwing the ball 20 yards down the field than you are 5? Like, Cam was an anomaly, man. But like, regardless, they go out and get all these humongous receivers because of his, because footwork. Honestly, if we just being honest about it, it was footwork. And, Cam's a tall quarterback, and sometimes it is harder being a tall quarterback. But then as, time started going on, if Cam had not gotten injured, that 2017 year, I think Cam was getting ready to develop into a legitimate, like, hardcore, pick you apart from the pocket kind of passer, right? But the feet thing, yeah, is it cool to watch? Does it pop off the page? Is it the 60-second trailer that just jumps off the page to you or whatever like that when you watch, you know, Justin Fields take off for, 30, 40 yards down the field. Yes. But if we really want to be serious about being a contender in this league, man, you got to win it from the pocket, man. I'm sorry. Like I like Justin Fields, and this is no shot at him. I don't want to take any shot at him. But if you're going to win it, you got to win it from the pocket. So I don't think if I go into the interview, Justin Fields is the guy that I'm like caping for. That I'm like, oh yeah, man, I definitely got to have Justin Fields. No, I think I can do, I can do a little different. But if they bring him in, I mean, obviously I'm gonna be happy with whatever decision they make. But anyway, to the coaching thing. So at the end of this, I'll give you who I believe, in my opinion, the coach should be. So interim head coaches, there was a record that I heard or something, and it was something to the effect of interim head coaches have like a severely below 500 record when they get the head coaching job, overall. I think this situation is a little different, just because of the proximity of Steve Wilks at home. Rich Bisaccia, the Raiders made a mistake. We saw Thomas Davis come out and talk about that on Instagram. The Raiders made a mistake by not letting, giving Bisaccia a chance. Like, they didn't have to bring in Josh McDaniel. They could have given Rich Bisaccia a chance, and, maybe it turns out different for them this year. But I think Mark Davis, similar to possibly even David Tepper, I guess this decision will really show us a lot about Tepper, because Mark Davis likes the splashy, quote unquote, sexy hire or whatever. When the truth is that they had a guy that probably would have been really good for them moving forward. But they bring in, and it just completely throws off everything, which most people believe that Tom Brady will, likely be a Raider next year. Whether that, happens or not remains to be seen. But I think if it were me, obviously I'm going to take the players into consideration. I don't think I've ever seen a situation where an interim head coach has won over players in this way, and they've been so vocal about wanting that coach to be the next guy for them. Like, you don't see that often, which is super cool. I do understand what David Tepper is probably thinking in terms of, man, if you look around the league and you look at Nick Sirianni and what he's doing with the Eagles, or you look at Mike McDaniel and what he's done with the Dolphins, Sean McVay, what he was able to do when he came in with Goff, in the beginning, getting to a Super Bowl, it is easy to see why you would want to go for the young offensive mind, right? Because they have fresh new ideas. They understand the concepts of football and offense a lot different than, before. They relate to guys just as good. And here's the thing, like, I understand the players want Wilks, but like, if the measuring stick is like, hey, we're only going to hire Wilks because we're afraid of what these players will do. Listen, we write paychecks here. If we got to go get new players, we'll get new players. Like, I mean, I know it'll be a rebuild, but like, you can't just because you want this guy, because here's another thing. Steve Wilks was able to go 6-6 in his time as interim head coach, right? Which is impressive when you consider just how inept, things were around here, firing Phil Snow, getting rid of Robbie Anderson, trading Christian McCaffrey. Like, there's a lot to be said for being able to go 6-6, when you consider the things that did happen. But the measuring stick can't be Matt Rule. And that's not, we can't lose sight of that. The measuring stick can't be Matt Rule, because that's not really a good measuring stick. But you do have to look at the fact that he did pull off some impressive wins. That win against Detroit, impressive win. The win against, the almost sweeping of Atlanta, impressive. The fact that he was actually in the game in Tampa and had a chance to win that game, impressive. The rushing yards, impressive. Like, the way that these guys responded and how hard they played for him was super impressive. The thing is with the interim coach, man, if any guys, I don't know if you guys remember, I want to say it was 2009. It was the 2009 season. And I know coach and quarterback is completely different, but anybody remember when Matt Moore rolled off, like, what was it, 3 or 4 wins to end the season after Jake had his second Tommy John injury or whatever? And Matt Moore comes in and rolls off, what was it? It might have been more than that. It was like 3, 4, or 5 wins or something like that, right? And, they gave him a chance the next season and he bombed, because it is sometimes when you're playing with house money, sometimes it is easier to succeed because there's not a lot of expectation. It was 2009. Yeah, thank you, SC Base. And so, yeah, if we didn't get flagged for, the DJ thing, then yeah, it'd be a whole lot different. But the point is that sometimes that's the one thing about Wilks. Like, I don't hold the Arizona thing against Wilks because one, Wilks didn't get to choose his own staff there. He didn't get to do it here really, but he certainly didn't get to do it there. And it was a lot of, just absolute like toxic situations going on from the, ownership down, in Arizona. So I don't hold that against him. I think what we saw this year with Wilks was more indicative of who he can be as a coach or what he will be as a coach to what we saw in Arizona. And so that's one thing you have to look at. But then at the same time, he's not going to be the guy necessarily picking players. I think that he will absolutely be in concert with Scott Fitterer on picking those players. And that's one thing I got to say about Scott Fitt, man. Like, Matt Rule might not have been the guy for us, but one thing I love, man, because you don't see this a lot. A lot of people don't realize, like, when Harbaugh left, I mean, you got to think, Harbaugh's last season, when players were hurt, Josh Borland retired, I think Patrick Willis retired. I mean, they didn't have a ton of, I think Josh Borland may have retired the year after Harbaugh left. I could be wrong, but I know Patrick Willis was gone, right? So they didn't have, a ton of, they lost a lot. They lost a lot of pieces. Some pieces to injury, some people to trades, things like that. And they still went 8-8. They still were 8-8, was still, a very solid team, went 500. But man, Trent Baalke, man, they did not get along. Him and Harbaugh could not get along for anything. And the one thing I can say about Scott Fitterer is, like, you can tell Matt Rule can be one of those guys that potentially might be a little bit tough to get along with as well. And he's always willing to collaborate. He would collaborate but he wasn't superseded. He would collaborate, but he was never superseded by Tepper. He was never superseded by Matt Rule. He was still making his moves, doing the things that he needed to do to try to build this team. Now, what I think will be different this time is that the pedigree of player that he and Steve Wilks, or he and Ben Johnson, or he and, Shane Steichen, whoever will see, will be far more complementary to what is already existing here, because you have a blueprint to build from, right? That's why if you listen to any of my shows historically, the thing that I've always been afraid of when it comes to the Carolina Panthers, the thing that has always scared me, it has always terrified me that we would be in an instant cycle of mediocrity. Why? Because what happens to teams that end up in mediocrity? They just keep chasing their tail. Let me go hire a new coach. Let me get a new quarterback. Let me go replace this player, that player. Man, at some point, you got to give guys time to develop. If we're going to look at Derek Brown right now, he's the latest example. I used to use examples from years ago. But if we're going to look at, if we're going to honestly look at Derek Brown right now and say, man, there's no way, like I saw somebody come up with a trade scenario. Yo, Chicago, for Bryce Young or whoever at the top of the draft, we'll give you Derek Brown and our 9th pick and maybe one of our 2s. And I'm like, man, you crazy. And the reason I say it's crazy because a year ago, people was trying to get Derek Brown out of here. And I'm like, guys, at some point, everybody's not. Now, don't get me wrong, you need guys that are the Nick Bosas, the Julius Peppers, the Cam Newtons. You need guys that are going to pop right away. But that's not the case for every guy. That's the exception, not the rule. The rule is that most guys have to take time to develop. Like, you have to develop. And so I think that having a coach like Wilks, I'm going to tell you a guy. I don't know if y'all caught this part, man. There was a part where Steve Wilks was addressing the team, after they beat New Orleans. And he was in the locker room and he was talking about finish or whatever like that. And they were talking about the Amari Barno sack. And he goes over and he grabs Amari by the ears and he's just kind of shaking his ears or whatever. And he was like, man, you did it, man. And I'm like, boy, I tell you, that's the kind of man right there that will lead somebody to run through a wall for him. That's the kind of man that can lead you to become a better man in life, and like, that's so hard to replace. Those are the kind of things that people saw that's going to be hard to get out of their mind if they decide to go another direction with a coach. That's going to be hard for you to get out of your mind, seeing a guy that motivates his players that heavily. Like, it's going to be tough to get that out of your head, right? But anyway, so let's keep moving. I was thinking about the quarterback situation. What should we do? I said something on Twitter and people was killing me. And I was like, I'm running it back with Sam. And it was like, they was going crazy on me on Twitter for good reason. Sam Darnold definitely turned the ball over quite a bit over the last 2 games, which is customary to what, he is. But Sam also shows some consistency, more than he has really in his whole career over that stretch of, 5 or 6 games or whatever. And so would I run it with him as a bridge? I don't think you're going to be able to sell that. I think that's going to be the thing with Tepper. Like, if Wilks was already the coach, I think Sam Darnold would certainly be the guy that you run it back with. But I think Sam Darnold's, my Twitter is, at the one Carolina. But it's going to be a hard sell to David Tepper like, hey, I think we can run it back with Sam Darnold. Because he's probably going to be like, go fly a kite. But what I will say is this. I would say to you guys, what I would say, for us to be patient with and to understand. And this ain't going to sound good coming from me, but I heard this today and I really believe it. I believe that this year will be another one of those years where we go either dip in the free agent class or sign somebody or something like that. I don't think that we're going to draft a quarterback. I really don't. Like, I think if we were in the top 5, then it's more possible because we'd have more, opportunity to move up on one of these guys. The only way that I say that we draft a quarterback, and here's where the scenarios come in, right? I only see maybe 2 scenarios where we draft a quarterback. If Jim Caldwell ends up getting the coaching job, I'm going to say Jim Caldwell, Ben Johnson, or potentially even Wilks. If either one of those 3 guys end up with the quarterback position, with the job, my guess is that they probably draft Will Levis if he falls. I don't think they move up for him, but I think they would draft Will. If Will Levis falls, I believe Carolina would draft him. The one thing I will say about Will Levis is this. Will Levis has a huge issue with turnovers. That is a huge issue with turnovers. Has a huge issue with turnovers. Those are things that can, with some guys, it's a 50-50 coin flip, can be worked out. You can work some guys out of turnover issues. But I don't know if that's a route that you necessarily want to go. But I will say this. One thing that Will Levis does, and one of the reasons why Mel Kiper has him higher on his board than anybody else, Will Levis throws the ball in the middle of the field like better than any quarterback in this entire draft. And that's the NFL. Throwing 5-yard outs to the edges, outside the hashes, and throwing in the middle of the field. Why can he do that? Because he can see. And that's the biggest knock on Bryce Young. I love Bryce Young. I think Bryce Young can be the anomaly. He can be the exception more than the rule because of his manipulation of what he can do inside the pocket. But if I'm looking at the draft class and I'm just going off of measurables, I got to go Levis. I would go Levis, not because of what he is, but because of what I think he can be. Now, if he bombs, then I'm wrong. I'm dead wrong. But even if Bryce Young bombs, I'm wrong. No matter the college stats, And so I'm with a lot of you guys. I see a lot of your comments saying best player available. I would agree with that. I know many people say that they would, take an edge or something like that, or a defensive tackle. I'm gonna go another route. So if I'm Steve Wilks and I get the coaching job, right? I got 1 or 2 things that I can look at. I can say, all right, we are going to, and I think Scott Fitterer kind of let the cat out of the bag. We want to get some more explosive playmakers, right? Was a tweet he sent out or whatever. I know many people say linebacker or whatever. Personally, my first pick in this draft, if we don't move, if let's say Wilks gets the job, we don't move, and everything stays the same. I would even say if Ben got the job, if Shane got the job, whoever, I'm going to just narrow this down. I'm going to say Ben and Steve Wilks. I think those are the 2. I don't think that I think Shane, yeah, cool, or whatever. I can see a pathway for Shane, and I'll get into that in a second, but I think it's either Ben or, who said that? I think it's either Ben or Steve Wilks. And somebody in the chat, I think it was Popping Bullets, just said what I would do. My first pick and the ninth pick would be Quentin Johnson. I'm not, if that guy falls to me at number 9, there's zero chance I'm passing him up. At worst, he's AJ Brown. At best, he's Justin Jefferson / Julio. There's no way I'm passing that up. And here's why. Because you get so many different opportunities. If you decide to go more traditional with your offense, he has a Justin Jefferson kind of approach where you can target him multiple times a game and you have a stout running game like we have. If Wilks gets the job, that's my guess. My guess is that we stay a more traditional conservative route, which means that 9 times out of 10, our quarterback for next year will likely either be Sam Darnold or Derek Carr. If they decide to, if I'm Wilks, I'm building on what I've already built. My pedigree is defense. Now I'm about to build a bully. And if you want me to tell you the truth, there's not much difference between what Steve Wilks does and what Jim Harbaugh does. Jim Harbaugh builds tough defense. He builds a stout offensive line, and he builds a running game. Has it ever won a Super Bowl? No. Has it been there? Yes. Was it very close? Could you argue that Michael Crabtree was held on that last play in that Super Bowl against the Ravens? Absolutely. And I think that Steve Wilks will build a similar kind of team. You can see the pedigree. You know, we have the players to do that. That's why my belief is that this thing, it's not going to take years to flip this thing over. I strongly believe that if Steve Wilks gets this job, we'll be a playoff team next year. We'll be a contender next year. Think about guys that might develop. Think about his development with Amari Barno. Think about the potential of him developing Brandon Smith. Think about Shi Smith's potential development. You know, here's another guy that I'm looking at. If I'm trying to bolster up this offense to really be that McConkey kid out of Georgia. Listen, in the later round, 4th or 5th round, you crazy if you think it's something he ain't somebody I'm looking at. But I think he's going to be a guy that a lot of people are going to be looking at because guys like Hunter Renfrow got looked over. Guys like, you know, who else? What's the other slot guy? Adam Thielen. Well, Adam Thielen's not, you know, primarily slot, but guys like him get looked over like crazy, and they get drafted in these later rounds or whatever. I can't remember this guy's name. I can't remember. So y'all can help me. But the Falcons had a guy like that back in the like 90s named Tim something. He wore number 80. He was like a punt returner and a receiver. Nasty. You know, Wes Welker, Danny Amendola, all these guys, these slot guys get looked over like crazy. So the McConkey kid, I'm definitely out of Georgia. I'm definitely looking at. As far as like tight end is concerned, honestly, I don't think we make a move at tight end if you're going to stay with a bolstered running game. The only thing that I can see, because I know a lot of people talk about Darnell Washington, right? I like Darnell Washington. Darnell Washington is a freak of nature athlete. But if you're drafting him, the only thing you're telling me is that you want to make this running game go from already great to unstoppable. Because he's not really the possession tight end. If I'm going possession tight end in a later round, I'm going Dalton Kincaid out of Utah. Like, I'm not going with Darnell Washington. But it just depends. And I think that would be a good move because Tommy Tremble's a good run blocking tight end. Ian Thomas is, you know, very much underrated. Very good running blocking tight end out of, you know, on our team. So not so much pass catching, but blocking. Yeah, excellent. But anyway, so you got that route that you can go. Now, if they decide to go the Shane Steichen route, or let's just say hypothetically Steve Wilks says, you know what, I want to do something a little different. I'm going to build my brand of defense. We're definitely going to run the ball. But, man, we're still going to draft Quentin Johnson. But we got this kid on our roster. And I'm going to tell you, another way that Carolina could flip really fast, and you got to think about his development. That's one thing. But Matt Corral, like, when you look at what the Eagles are doing with their RPO offense, running a lot of 10 and double and zero personnel, you know, they put a ton of receivers on the field to create mismatches, right? You bring in a Quentin. You already got, you know, DJ Moore. You got Shi Smith. You know, maybe you bring in another, you know, free agent burner, or, you know, something like that, somebody you can put into the slot or whatever. Terrace Marshall Jr. That, you know, but see, that's another guy. Willie Smith. We're talking about Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson, to me, is one of those guys who, you know, he's another one. If you want to go heavy RPO, I just, like, The only way I would draft Anthony Richardson is if Justin Fields, to me, if you're gonna bring in Justin Fields, I would rather go Anthony Richardson. Not even so much for the talent. You're basically getting the same guy in a lot of ways, but more. He is obviously far more talented, far more athletic. But it would be to set the rookie contract clock over, because like you bring in Justin Fields, 2 years later he balls out, you're gonna have to pay him. Like, or a year, yeah, 2 years. You're gonna have to pay him, and I think it just wouldn't make sense, money wise. But in terms of the RPO, I mean, Matt Corral ran the RPO with brilliance at Ole Miss. What's up, Donald? Ran the RPO with absolute brilliance. If you bring in a ton of weapons, do they decide to go a similar route, with the RPO? I think that's something very, very interesting to keep our eye on. So quarterback, like I said, you got a couple of different ways you can go. I think Matt Corral is going to be odd man out, because if we had struggled offensively running the ball, then I say, yeah, we would probably implement. This is why. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to the part of what I believe. I think this is Wilks' job. I think this is Steve Wilks' job. I told y'all before, Steve Wilks, if he done one thing better than he done anything else, he provided clarity. He provided you clarity. That is the best that you can ask for any football team at the end of a year, is to have clarity provided for you. Why? Because it lets you know where you are and where you need to go. What can I build from? Offensively, the last 2 years, really the last 3 years, since Matt Rule became our coach, there's zero, like firing Joe Brady, there was really no like identity to this team, and we had no clue where we were going to go. All right, we got this back that we could we, pound the rock with him, 20, 30 times a game, sure, but 9 times out of 10 we do that, he's going to get hurt. That was Christian McCaffrey. We went out and got Deontay Foreman, but we still got to give, touches to this guy that, is getting paid, all this money. And it's like, and then you trade him and you realize like, oh, I got a workhorse back. I got another complimentary back in Chuba. I got another back that can come in and kind of a scat back in Blackshear, So like the running game has been established, completely established, right? So like, I don't think they go the RPO route. And to be quite honest, I don't believe Matt Corral is going to be a quarterback that can change. And this is where I agree with a lot of the takes that I see on Twitter about Matt Corral. Matt Corral doesn't suck. Matt Corral in the right system, I think, would be a really good quarterback. Unfortunately, the clarity that Steve Wilks provided for our team is that this team is built ground and pound, baby. Run the ball, play action, quarterback passing. I personally think a guy like Derek Carr would flourish, with a team like this. You bring in a Quentin Johnson and get the right kind of play calling, and this could turn into something very interesting. But I just think that there's too much that you would have to change and flip. I think Deontay Foreman would, I'm not going to say he would be obsolete, but like a lot of people are talking about Josh Jacobs, going to the Eagles, whatever. It wouldn't fit. Like in a system like that, in an RPO system, you can't have you very rarely, like, it's not that you won't have 1,000-yard back, but like if the quarterback's running, if you get the option to run, they don't go they don't go hardcore play action, hand the ball off or whatever like that. 803 Carolina. No, I understand, man. I get it. And I know hypothetically, as a fan, I'm like you. I want to see a new quarterback, but I'm talking more about system than I am player, right? If we go out and get a new quarterback, then you're going to have to create a new system if that quarterback doesn't fit your system. In my opinion, like I said, Matt Corral is on the roster. If you want to go heavy RPO, that's your guy. You got him, But Wilks provided the kind of clarity that shows us that this is that's not what we need. We don't need a quarterback throwing the ball 40 times a game. We need the option to have that if it's necessary, right? Shout out to you, homie. 803. We need the option to have that if it's necessary, right? But we don't have to have that. That's why I was saying, like with Sam, if Sam cut down on his turnovers, he could be. Is Sam gonna win us a Super Bowl? I highly doubt it. Man, I'm gonna be honest with y'all, man. If we catch lightning in the bottle and win a Super Bowl, I would be, yes, I agree. Ben McAdoo is out. If we catch lightning in a bottle and win a Super Bowl, I would be thrilled, right? I would be absolutely thrilled with Sam Darnold. But is that what I'm looking for as a fan, in my opinion, personally? No. What I'm looking for is stability, because think about this. I remember when, who was it? Matt Castle. Matt Castle was playing for New England when Tom Brady got hurt in 2008. And he had a good season, and he went 10-6, I believe, right? And he got a contract with Kansas City. And I mean, they had players everywhere. They had I don't think Jamal Charles was quite there yet, but I know it was Matt Castle, Dexter McCluster, Dwayne Bowe. Like, I mean, they had just skilled players everywhere, and they just couldn't put it together. You know, um, it's almost impossible to put all that together and make it work. We saw that with an Eagles team. They called themselves the Dream Team or whatever, right? You have to have certain pieces. I've often said this. This might get me shot by some of y'all, for real. But I'm gonna just say it anyway. 2015 Cam Newton doesn't happen if Steve Smith is on the roster. Why? Because Steve Smith has established himself and he needs touches. What made that work was Cam was able to distribute the ball where he wanted to throw it and be able to run at will. That's the whole reason Gettleman done it. If you really think about it, that's the reason. In order to unlock this guy, this animal, this beast that we have, we can't. I mean, I saw clips of Smitty on the sideline like going crazy when we were actually winning and he wasn't getting the ball. Because that's the pedigree of a number one receiver, a dog number one receiver, not a diva. A dog. Smitty was not a diva. And please don't take me wrong. But I really don't believe that Cam has that season if Smitty's on the roster. I just don't, because he had more control to be able to do what he needed to do, to distribute the ball like he needed to distribute. We saw that in college. Cam Newton did the same thing in college with no receiver that even went in the draft, period. As a matter of fact, one of his, Sammy Coates, is playing for a USFL team, if I'm not mistaken, right? That was his best target that year, if I remember correctly. But anyway, as I was saying, I think that the Steve Wilks hardcore running game, play action quarterback, formula works perfectly. And man, think about this, guys. Like, we saw Matt Stafford struggle in Detroit for years. I know a lot of people aren't on the Derek Carr train, but like, where did we see Derek Carr the most successful? When they weren't. Josh McDaniels always goes away from the run, right? If you stay dedicated, I'm not saying that he would be an all-world guy, but like, I think he'd be solid, So I just really strongly believe that Steve Wilks, I don't even think it's that he deserves to get this job. I think he's the right man for the job based on what you've seen. I don't know too many guys that would have been able to provide that kind of clarity for a franchise like this. Let's not forget, some of these same players that's out there, caping for Steve Wilks, some of these same players were out there saying the same thing about Matt Rule when he got fired. Now, whether or not it was cap or not, we don't know. But I'm old enough to remember players out there supporting Matt Rule before he got canned. So it's not lost on me the idea that sometimes players just like, it's momentarily. It happens in the moment, right? So we'll just have to see how that happens. But anyway, want to read a couple of you guys' comments real quick. See, I'm open to Carr. Raiders never appreciated him. I agree. You're right. And whatever system Wilks goes will work. I agree with that. McAdoo is out. I definitely agree with that. I heard Brian Johnson, QB coach for Eagles, is Wilks' choice for OC, and he wants to draft AR. That would be crazy. Heck no, not that. We already talked about that. Johnson, Richardson, Foreman, Chubb, DJ, TMJ, dangerous. I agree. That would be indeed be dangerous. Man, somebody. So I'm picking up my kids, and somebody just they must have been asleep because they hit the chain that surrounds the driving lines, and the teachers look like, what the crap? Crazy. But anyway, yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm interested to see where this goes, how this goes. I can't wait to really get this part out of the way. Like I hope that Wilks does get the job. I can't lie. Again, I do have a partiality to Ben Johnson because of, he is a AC Reynolds High School alum, as am I. And so I would with Ben, it's not even so much like it would be a cool story just because of how much would be highlighted of my hometown. If he did get the job, like they would, probably be cameras all over the place all the time. But it's not even so much about him getting a job here, as much as it is to me him just getting a job. Period. Like it's just super cool, just to see him in that position. Period. But Elias says he doesn't think that Johnson falls to us. Carr will expect how much money? I mean, coming off a bad season like that, I don't think his expectations are really high at all. Like it's going to be market value for somebody of his tier for sure. I don't think Carr's going to get some huge deal or nothing crazy like that. Too, maybe a one. Maybe Carr bets on himself and does signs a 1-year deal somewhere. Because I just don't believe that there's going to be like Derek Carr is solid, but I don't think there's going to be. I don't think it's a Sam Darnold situation. Like, and here's what I can tell you for sure. I don't think we're going to burn ourselves like we did with Sam Darnold going out and trading, for somebody or whatever like that. But Carr might be a free agent for all I know. I don't know. Y'all clarify me on that. I don't really pay attention to a lot of that kind of stuff. But like Adams, he might. It's possible. But he's he got a lot. It's a lot of money out there for him. I seen D Hop, was available, but I just personally like would D Hop be a cool option? I think D Hop gonna end up somewhere where he can win a title. Like Kansas City or Buffalo or one of these teams like that. Like I don't imagine D Hop ending up in Carolina. But of course, I don't know if it's necessarily in his wheelhouse because he might not have a chance. From my understanding, he's still under contract and he's being traded, not being released, or he's not a free agent. So it's really up to the Cardinals what they decide to do with him, which is that's something interesting to watch as well. So, but yeah, I'm ready to get this part out of the way so we can really start looking at the draft. But like I said, when you look at San Fran, man, and like you see what they're doing with Brock Purdy and just how they built that roster. We've seen San Fran at the top of drafts before and draft Solomon Thomas or whatever, and or the Bosa, or whatever, and good teams find a way to just continue to build. And I think that the one thing I will say about Wilks is this, and this is the difference between a Wilks and a Harbaugh or somebody else like that. And this also has to be in the back of the mind of someone like David Tepper, right? And really just fans in general. The Harbaugh thing is like, all right, anywhere you've gone, you never plant your feet. Michigan might be the first place where you stay for an extended period of time if they re-up the money, if you don't take the Denver job. David Tepper has always said that he wanted to hire his Chuck Knowles, right? I think Wilks could be that. I think Wilks could be his Chuck Knowles. I think it got so bad and so toxic with Matt Rule inside the locker room, on Twitter, in the community, in the media, that it really left Tepper no choice. I honestly believe if Matt Rule, because I said this last time, if y'all remember, Matt Rule shot himself in the foot by trying to prove himself right. My wife and I live by a set of standards, man. We have a set, as a believer in Christ, I live by a set of standards already. But one of my sayings that is rooted, with me, I never try to be right. I always try to get it right. Right? So being right is Matt Rule running around telling any and everybody who had an ear here, like that. I didn't have this, that, and it's like, well, being people give you your flowers for the fact that, hey, if our thought process was, well, Matt Rule was behind the decision to bring in Deontay Foreman, he just didn't play him. Matt Rule was part of the decision to bring in Bozeman, he just didn't play him. Matt Rule was the decision maker behind drafting Derek Brown. Matt Rule was the decision maker behind all these kind of things. Then guess what happens when Steve Wilks start doing well by it? Man, Matt, you know what? I know we gave you a hard time, man, but we got to give you some credit, man. You did bring in these players that that we're looking at now, and it's just like, man, this situation looks great now. Thank you. It might not have worked out for you, but it's working out for somebody else. But see, the problem is that if you just shut up and let things play out, but that's neither here nor there. But the point is, like I said, I don't think that Matt gets fired if he doesn't, cause a storm for himself by talking too much. I think with Steve Wilks, because like I said, Tepper has openly communicated, I want to hire my Chuck Knowles. Chuck Knowles was the Steelers coach for what, 15 years? You know what I'm saying? Like, he doesn't want a lot of turnover. So if you don't want that, and you already have guys that are bought in for Wilks, I think Wilks and Scott Fitter could be a tandem that could last for a very, very, very long time. So with that being said, guys, I appreciate your time. Getting ready to pick up my little kids. I've enjoyed hanging out with you on this rainy Wednesday afternoon. But I will be back with you soon, and I hope all of you guys have an excellent day. And more importantly, that you